Hello, DeadSlayer54 here, and I'm going to show you the quick basics of unions and meshes. This shouldn't take too long because it's actually a pretty simple subject. Just a few things that you should probably know in working with them. So, let's get started. You'll find with building, you have your four primary parts. You have your block, your sphere, your wedge, and your cylinder. You can make quite a bit with these, actually. Like, there's a lot you can make, but you'll find yourself wanting to use some more custom parts. Example, let's say you wanted to make a teleportation chamber or something. You're going to want, or at least for the model that I'm going to want a nice cylinder container. So let's take this cylinder, let's tilt it with the T, and then I'm going to resize this. Let's see, what's the size of this little plate here? 16 by 16, so let's take U. Let's make you, say, 15 studs maybe? Make this 10 by 10. There we go, that's nice, I like that. Not exactly centering very well, is it? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I guess it is centered. So, maybe make it a little taller. I'm not sure. So, you have the cylinder as the primary part. That's all fine and dandy, but you can't exactly go into a teleportation chamber if it's literally just a solid wall. So, we're going to want to make it hollow inside so that it's an actual chamber. This is one of the examples of what you will be using negative parts and union to accomplish. So let's take this and let's make sure we can identify it. I'm going to call this chamber. Now I know that this is my chamber. But you're going to want to build the inside as well. So duplicate this. Let's call this inside so I can identify it as the inside. And now how negative parts work is you build the gap that you want inside a block. Like if you look at the negate tool caption, it says negate parts for making holes. Then you'll combine them with union, fuse parts together to make a single part. So if you fuse a hole and a part, you're basically cutting into that part. But it doesn't know exactly how to do so, so you have to build what you want to cut. There's another issue that you should probably keep in mind when working with negative parts. So if I have this brick, now I wanted to make it longer. With my scale tool, I can just click, drag, and I can make it longer. It's not wider, it's not taller. I can do that if I want, but I have control over each one individually. Control Z to undo. Now, if I negate the part, it's ready to be a hole if I want it to be, and it'll be a nice rectangular hole. But if I wanted it to be longer, click and drag. Now, you'll see it's getting wider as well, but it's also kind of fused inside the base plate. So now you can see it's also taller and just gets wider and taller the longer I try to make it. You can't change anything individually when it comes to negative parts. So if I wanted to make this longer, I'll have to negate it again to bring it back to normal, resize it, and then make it negative again. So it's a little tedious, it's weird. Negative parts don't have the same support as solid parts. Just something you should know. Delete that. So what we're going to want to do with that in mind is we're going to want to change the size of our inside before we make a negative. To easily do this, I'm going to change the transparency of my actual chamber, the one I'm not going to be changing, to 0.4 so that it's a little more see-through. There's no change yet because the inside is the exact same size. So I don't want it to cut through the ceiling. So let's drag this down a notch. I also don't want it to cut through the walls. I want it to cut the inside, but I want to leave the outside alone. So let's make it smaller. Now you can see it'll be not quite as big as the rest of the chamber. So it's going to be a nice hollow inside, and we're still going to have our walls. However, it's also the exact spot on the floor, so that makes it kind of weird. I want the floor to be cut through. So I'm going to, when in doubt, make sure it'll cut all the way through by dragging it even further beyond. So now I have the inside for my chamber. Let's negate it, select my chamber, and combine them. So you'll already see that it's cut through. I forgot to change the transparency, but it's a good way to look. So what you can do, separate. Let's take my chamber once more. Transparency, 0. Control click. And union once more. Now it's a little harder to see, but you'll see that you still have the same view when I hold these down. But I also cut through the floor, so if you go underneath it, you'll see a nice hollowed inside. But there's no door. We kind of want a door. How else is a player supposed to go through it? So I want a square door. So let's take this part. You know, I think it's probably a good enough width. So let's leave the width alone. But when in doubt, if you want it to cut all the way through, make sure it extends beyond what you're cutting through. Now if I look in here, you'll see it doesn't actually go through the wall. So I'll still have the wall except for maybe that teeny tiny little sliver there. So I'm going to want to scale, drag this. When in doubt, make sure it's all the way through. It's all the way through. I should be set. And then let's make it a little taller so the players can actually fit in it. There we go, that's nice. So negate this, select my chamber, union. Now, you'll see I have a nice chamber with a nice doorway, and it's hollow, it's set, players can walk in and out. Let's make this a little fancier. Let's take the ball. Actually, let's see, what's the width of this? Size, 10 by 10. Okay, so let's take this, make it also 10, 10, 10. Drag you on top, and then move you down. That's flush enough. So now it'll look much nicer, with one caveat. The inside is also going to have that weird roundness sticking out. That doesn't look very nice. So how can I fix this? I can make another part and then hollow it out, or I can separate these, separate this once more, and I can instead union this part in my chamber. Now it's one solid part. I can even union my negative parts so that they are just one part rather than dealing with a bunch of them. And I can union them together to redo exactly what I did. But now, order of operations, it is nice and flat inside. So I now have a much more beautiful chamber. Now, with unions, you'll see it's a union instead of a part. You can change the material if you want. You see I have glass, granite, grass, ice, marble, metal. But if I try to change the color, you'll see it's not really accomplishing anything. Even if I click OK, it's supposed to be green, sea green, but it's not. So how do I fix this? Well, you'll see I also have a little bit of that little floor bit there left. I don't exactly want that. Let us separate this. Take my negative part, separate, take the doorway, make it further so that I know it's, whoopsies. As I said, you can't just change one axis. Negate, make it taller, negate, union, and back to what we had. But as you recall, it doesn't change the color. You can fix this, but you have to specify that you want it, because by default, you can't do this. So under properties, you'll see appearance, you have all the normal stuff, but under data, you'll see this new thing called use part color. So if it's already unchecked because by default, don't use the color. But if I click it, now behaves almost like a regular part. I can still change the material, but now I can change the color as well. Okay. So let me save real quick. Save to Roblox as temp. Overwrite. Cool. I don't have the best computer, and these videos tend to crash my studio, resulting in me having to redo the whole thing. So I'm saving now to save my place. But now that I have the color and now I have access to color, material, transparency, etc., regular parts, I kind of want to make it a little shorter. I think I made it a little too tall. So take scale, and you'll notice another issue with unions. It's exactly like the negative parts. I can't make it shorter. Well, I can, but I'm making it specifically smaller, all in all. I want it to be shorter, but I want to keep the rest of the dimensions. How do I accomplish this? Well, you can take a union and you can make it into a mesh. A mesh is a strange block just like this, just like a union, but it acts like an actual part. So how do we make a mesh out of a union? You can take your union, right click, export selection, yeah, sure, Roblox autosave. So make sure you copy whatever the destination is. Make sure it's saved as object file. I'm going to call this telechamber save. Give that a moment to save. Now, you can delete it. You don't need it anymore. So, under workspace, click the insert button. You'll see mesh part. If you do not see mesh part, you can, under search object, type mesh. Forgive the slow laptop. It's been around for a minute. So, as I mentioned earlier, it is important to save. That little hiccup there was not Studio just being slow from a slow laptop. It was Studio straight up crashing from a slow laptop. Especially when I'm trying to record as I'm using Studio, it doesn't work all the time. But that's why you want to save. So, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need the union anymore because we're trying to import a mesh. So what we can do, insert object. If you don't see mesh, you can always search for it. So let's type in mesh, and we have mesh part. now we have this nice, lovely checkerboard break. That's basically just the default. You'll see under properties, you'll have appearance, this weird thing called mesh ID. So this is basically what we were exporting with our union. So if we open this, see telechamber.object, exactly as I'd saved. Open that. Let's click no. The location data isn't exact anyway, so if we did export it from the position that we want it, however, it's not actually going to give the location that we want. It's going to try, but it's not exactly what we want. However, now we have our chamber again. Let's rotate you. There we go. So you'll notice a couple things. One, it's still marble. It's not plastic. It's exactly how we exported it material-wise, but the color was changed to the default brick. So we can, well, you'll notice we can't actually change the color anymore, nor can we actually change the material. You'll see some visual change. Oh, okay, force field kind of works. But it tries. It really tries. However, since we exported it as colored and as materialed, it's no longer actually supporting either of those features. So you'll want to make sure there's no material, so you'll want it to be plastic. You can color it if you want. I don't honestly know. I'll have to play around with that. But the general idea with making this a mesh is we wanted to make this shorter. Last time, we tried scaling it down. It made it smaller. It did make it shorter, but it also changed everything else. So now that it's a mesh, we can make it shorter. It also makes the door shorter because relative size, but it's not changing the rest of the axes. So we have it shorter, a nice little telechamber. Not the color that we were after, but we can make do. So this is a general idea of what you would want to use meshes and unions for. You can create your custom parts with unions, and if you wanted to change the sizes a little more accurately, you can convert them to mesh by exporting them and then importing them as an object. If you want to keep the color and whatnot, you might not want to export an already modeled item. You'll probably want to keep it plastic. But there's also one more thing that you should probably keep in mind. When creating meshes, you'll remember we were able to cut holes and whatnot by making them negative and then unioning them. So what if you imported a mesh that you wanted to use as a hole? Well, bad news, not supported. So if you want to keep doing more things with it, say take this part, union, not supported. The bright side of meshes is you can change the size more specifically. The downside, this is your final product. So if you're going to be exporting something as a mesh, make sure you've completed it first, because you can't make any alterations anymore besides the size. So keeping these things in mind, that the struggles of resizing negative parts, or the struggles of keeping in mind how exactly you're going to cut things, it takes some practice, but you'll get used to it in time. So make sure you practice it, and whoopsies. Next video, I'm going to be going over the basics of scripting, as I have now covered all you really need to know to get started with building on Roblox, because now you can make your own custom stuff, and you can even shape them. So My next video is going to be scripting basic visual properties. So we'll be going over how to change colors, transparency, and other similar properties through script. With that, you can make a part that changes color every now and then, which is always kind of nice to see. But that will be next video. Stay tuned. Dead Slayer 54 out.